So
Hello. People coming visiting your home?
there's somebody fixing the washing machine. So yeah. Look at your hair.
It's not tied up. I just had a shower and
Yeah.
washed, so it's not tied up in as it usually is.
Right. Yeah, if you look at my hair, you'll see it's not there.
I have pretty long hair.
Yeah.
That's pandemic. I've decided to let it go, but I decided I liked it with
Okay. You didn't have long hair before the pandemic?
not in years, let's put it that way. I had hair this long in my early 20s,
Yeah, okay.
but not since.
Yeah, I was letting mine grow out for, I don't know, I went maybe 8 months. And then I was like, no, can't.
It is more maintenance. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, sorry, I'm late.
No problem. We were taking it easy. Give me 2 seconds, changing screens, getting ready. Should have done that first. So I think we have a clear agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you.
Oh, you froze. We have a clear agenda, but not a clear connection.
You for all the work. Get going.
Your video is frozen, microphone.
Yeah, I think. Do you hear me still?
Mm-hmm. Now I do.
Okay, so I think it'll come back slowly. It's I just added the big screen so I could see you and.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. Probably system resources weren't
yep.
being able to follow.
Found a few fascinating articles on view alignment, but that'll be later. That'll be Friday probably, or this next week seminar.
I'm a bit tired today, so I will be slower than usual.
Fair. It's happened to all of us.
Yeah. So I think we concluded that we need to find an adjective for, what was it? Candidate.
It was contributed. Yeah, it's something that says it's meant for a specific model or different, domain object or something. I kind of wrote up.
Right. So you didn't add it yet to the board?
No.
Yeah, I was going to ask. It's.
What's the working title? Contributed or?
It's contributed is what we're using so now.
We also used candidate before.
I like candidate.
Oh, that's right. Let's see. Yeah, I think we used candidate. Let me see what my submission was here. Hold on. Really slow on my computer right now. Come on, Slack. There it is. Candidate. Yeah.
Candidate means information submitted by a user or other actor for use as a specific domain type in the system. Should we?
Can you edit the card maybe, Timothy?
Yeah. Where? Hold on.
I think I'm there, almost.
I'm opening here, Trello.
So am I. Yeah, I got it.
Okay, let's try to rework this in format. So it would be information submitted by user or other actor for use as a specific domain type in the system.
Requirements, probably the minimum requirements.
It's a laboratory, so
Yeah,
that's a core definition.
Yeah.
Other actor, by that you mean
Process.
The system, or yeah.
But yeah, then you're implying that the user is something different from an actor.
Or
Well,
is
I'm
not the only
applying
kinds of
user
actors.
a user is a subset of actors.
Yep.
Yeah, which I find confusing because I would call actors users typically. They're just like a specific type of user. But does it matter information submitted?
For me, users are human. Actors includes non-human actors.
Oh, wait, it's clear what is meant.
I think I'm using the UML, or what is it, UML, or what is the
in
rational
UML, the
process
actors
definition of actor?
yeah, done by an actor. But yeah, I understand why user is.
That's fine.
Yeah,
just say
user
actor.
is optional. Yes.
Yeah.
Or any actor. Yeah, may not satisfy type or word.
The minimum requirements.
Oh, then I changed the wrong thing.
Yep.
Sorry. Is it a noun? Because now it's a noun, both a noun and an adjective, the way you use it here.
Correct.
Yeah, well, it'd be weird to say a candidate something. I don't know what follows candidate is.
A candidate.
Information.
Yeah, I was going to say that object, but yeah.
Okay.
Here, just it.
Well, what it does this? It must satisfy the minimum requirements of instantiation. What are those?
As per definition
on the type. Like, for example, if we decide that, what are the minimum requirements to create a claim, to make a candidate claim? There's like, you can't submit a blank claim.
Oh, like you mean stuff that can be weeded out by the system automatically, essentially.
It's about it has to be a string. Like, for instance, you cannot instantiate out of an array of integer, for example.
Yeah, but I mean, it seems like you're hinting at stuff that can be weeded out automatically.
Yeah, I mean, I think instantiation, I understand computationally. It's pretty clear to me what it means computation-wise.
But remember that
yeah,
this is a glossary that tries to stay clear of infrastructural details. Did we always say domain type? Is it
no,
just,
that's new. That we almost need to add.
I think we can. Yeah, I mean, it's just overloading it. We haven't defined type. We haven't defined domain type. So why don't just say type then? It says as much as domain type.
Okay.
And short is better typically.
Tim, fine. It's your definition.
I mean, essentially, we haven't defined either. So at this point, why is domain type clearer than just type? I don't think it is. Type of information is essentially what we want to say, right? But that's what it is. It's information, but apparently information is going to be grouped in certain types, and you submit stuff as a certain type.
I don't want to reinvent the wheel or have to define every single term that's in like an industry term, right? Domain type has a definition. Does domain type definition not fit what we mean here, or?
Not necessarily. You could have one domain type representing two different candidates, for example. I mean, those are implementation details.
I have no problem with domain type. I see why type is fine because it avoids defining domain type, but I also agree that it is an industry term and we can just assume it's known.
Yeah, but we're not, again, these definitions are not data modeling. They're not software engineering. They're requirements engineering. It's about having plain language free of.
But isn't domain type known to requirement engineering?
I don't think so.
In the name of incremental formalization, I would say we discuss the definition the moment we have a disagreement about it. Like,
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Why not keep it short?
I thought you meant, yeah.
Why domain type? Okay. Why not just type? In what way is it clear? Unless you really want to say it has to be like a specific implementation, but I don't think that's what you're saying.
Actually, I have an answer to that question. I think that when you say type, it's like, for example, strings versus integers is what I think of as a programmer. Whereas domain types, I know it's domain level modeling objects, not just generic data modeling objects. So I think it does add information. When you say in what way is it clearer, it is clearer to me that it's a domain level modeling object and not a low level type.
For me, that the equivalent in natural language would be type of information.
Low level types are types of information.
Okay, we can just put domain type on, but it's circular because I guess domain type is going to be any noun basically on this board. If that's what you're arguing.
But
that's what we're aiming for, right? Because we want to apply this adjective to any noun on this board.
Yep.
And we haven't called any of these nouns domain types.
No, because I think Tim is proposing we use domain type as a primitive concept that doesn't need to be defined, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Every definition system has to have primitive concepts, and I'm fine with saying domain type is a primitive concept.
Except that, yeah, okay, this is nitpicking, but a user shouldn't care about domain types when submitting information, right? A user doesn't deal with domain types. That's why it is an implementation detail mixed up with requirements.
Well, yeah, but then we'd say, because the other thing I was going to say then is something like information submitted by a user in a form for a specific type or something. We don't want to talk about forms. We don't want to talk about interface, right? We're just saying information is being submitted. And it's restricted somehow. It's restricted, structured information, right? So how are we going to describe the fact that this information is structured for the specific purpose, right? It's the domain model that we're more or less trying to discuss. I don't know how to bridge that without ambiguity.
Yeah, the other thing that I'm trying to find the balance between is, because again, instantiation is a pure implementation detail at this point. What if you have a system that has an AI and that can automatically detect whether something is a claim or not? For example, would that then
Then
not be well
what do you
formed at
mean?
that point, or
yeah, then
Well-
all candidates are rejected or accepted at creation.
it's like at what point? What it seems like part of the intent of candidate gets lost here by adding this last sentence, I think. I'm not really certain what you mean by that.
I think he's saying that we must be able to create, like, this is, even you may be right, it's an instantiation detail. How I understood it is I'm able to create an object. I don't know it's well formed, but I'm able to create an object of that type.
But once it exists, it is, isn't it?
I guess what I'm saying is that the candidate is an instance of that type.
Yes. It may not be a valid instance, but it's an instance.
Exactly, but then this becomes superfluous, and this becomes really hinting at like, oh, it needs to be a string, or it needs to be a maximum length of characters, which has more to do with
Criteria.
domain type than anything else.
Specific criteria. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Well, but I mean, the candidate, the definition of candidate implies certain attributes or pluggable, you know, if we were doing a modeling patterns, there would be strategies or something, pluggable strategies for, you know, the type generics, right? There's a type generic here, specific T, right? Type. And then the information does not necessarily pass the is valid method that's pluggable by each of the T, right? But it is an instance of the T.
Yeah, and that is worth expressing. That's not system specific. It's an instance of the type. It's created as an instance of the type. I agree.
Right. So, you know, maybe that's
it is another definition.
However, it is an instance of the type, and implied in there is for each type, if you're going to define rules for something being an instance, they would have to be passed in order for something to be an instance. So
I think it's more part of the submission process than anything else. I mean, it means that only certain types of data can be submitted for that domain type, but once it's submitted as a candidate.
Yes.
I mean, this addition for me hints more at the shortcoming of this definition than anything else. This part.
So information successfully submitted by a user.
Yeah, something like that would be for me more focused on what the use case, because we're introducing this again to go to, what was it? We wanted to use it in, I forgot, usable claim? No.
In
claim candidate. Yeah.
Where, yeah.
We're trying to decide whether how much overlap there is between candidate and usable. That's why we're working on candidate. Does candidate imply usable or not in our respective systems? That's the question. I like the successfully submitted because I think it does say what you like. The submission didn't fail.
Yeah.
And then I agree that then obviously it had the instantiation thing. How do you feel, Tim, about, does that capture enough?
Probably. We'll see if there's some sort of weird edge case where it doesn't. I think that does it. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yay. Progress.
And then we'll leave domain type undefined. That's fine. Who defines the criteria? It doesn't matter. Associated criteria, we leave that open. Okay, examples, stuff.
Yeah, I find finding examples for adjectives difficult because basically we must give adjective names, but that's okay. So we want to say that, let's take our examples of good claim and bad claim, right? By Viagra as a bad claim, it's still a claim candidate.
Submitted as a claim to a claim repository.
And
then also a valid claim would
the-
not pass criteria for a claim. Then
and then let's have a valid one. The earth is not flat. Submitted as a claim, important, yes. And then
it's
let's have
not
a
match definition.
let's have a non-claim actually. Let's have the earth submitted as an entity.
I was gonna say as a definition, we could, you know.
Yeah, that's an entity name. It's not an entity definition, but
For example, the cards here listed in the undefined column are candidate definitions.
yeah, nice.
Yeah, but the earth would pass, right? I mean, by definition,
It's absolutely, it's submitted as a claim. It's a candidate. It would be rejected, but it's absolutely a candidate.
Could pass criteria for entity domain type submissions, but not as a claim, something like that.
Yeah.
And then does not match definition, string of text on a website. Yeah, these are always weird.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be, I don't know if we'll even allow submitting
something that's not submitted.
Yeah, thoughts in someone's head. A claim in someone's head, for example, or words that one person spoke to another, things like that aren't captured by the system.
I think another counterexample is, do we allow typeless submissions? That may be an edge case actually. If somebody says, oh, this is like the system may or may not allow typeless submissions.
Well, and then it's not a candidate right now, according to this definition.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you bring it up, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a system dependent. I would not allow it, but
I would put it as it does not match definition. The system may support it. It doesn't match the definition of candidate.
Fair. That's cool. I'm happy with deciding that.
Sorry, which is?
What I said is text submitted without a type.
A system which does not this ambiguous, but this is where it gets interesting, right? Because I mean, well, any system, so it will depend on whether or not that system calls it a domain type. That's why that's my problem with domain type as a definition here. I mean, if you have a system where you can submit anything, why wouldn't that be a domain type? The domain type, you can submit anything.
Yeah, you're absolutely. That's why it may be an edge case after all, because in the interest of progressive formalization, it's like, I think this is important. I don't understand the type system. Let me propose it. Somebody else types it, please, for me. I think that's a valid use case. Whether or not we want to support it is another story, but it's a valid use case. No, but I wouldn't touch that yet. I wouldn't touch the definition yet. So, because what you're saying is any is a valid domain type, so don't touch that. Maybe put it in, I still think it's an edge case. It's without a type, without specifying type. It's not that the system doesn't, it's that it allows to enter without a type.
But you never specify the type. I mean, specifying the type indeed is fully determined by the form or by the type system or by, I mean.
Yeah, the question is, does the system allow you to enter information before specifying? Like there's a form which is any type. We don't know which type it will be, but it's the type any. Without specifying a specific.
Well, you know, what I can think of is like some unstructured data where let's say that there's a collection of documents that have been downloaded that are unstructured data, right? And at some point, AI may go through and start collecting sentences and whatever. And it's undecided at this point if these are going to become candidate claims or candidate arguments or candidate.
Yeah, but isn't the domain type at that point a file upload or something?
Yeah, but I don't think they're candidates.
No, but a sentence within a file doesn't really.
But I don't think they're candidate anything yet. They're
Yeah.
candidate information maybe, but I think that's a separate edge case, and maybe let's enter it.
Candidate really
but let's finish
ties
this
in
one.
that there are associated criteria. So that's part. So I think it's more important that anything that you upload that doesn't have criteria to be evaluated is not a candidate, I would argue.
Yeah, well, I think that
isn't that the core of the definition? Like, let me phrase it a question indeed. If there's no associated criteria, can you still call it a candidate?
yes, the well-formed, the associated criteria may be an empty set.
So I would argue then candidate becomes a bit of a useless adjective.
I don't think so.
Because I think that the term candidate really does imply that there's some criteria that need to be evaluated.
Okay, let me put it this way. Candidate is like a template adjective, right? It's more an adverb than an adjective, maybe, in a sense that it's candidate claim, candidate this, candidate that. And those are well-defined and non-vacuous because all of those would have criteria. Now, candidate any probably would have an empty list of criteria, and that's about being a candidate any. It's type, and even that, I'll go a bit further, Stephen. Any obviously doesn't mean any possible type, and here domain type is interesting. It's one of the types of the system. So it has to satisfy one of the sets of criteria, we just don't know which. So in a typing system, it would be, you know, these constraints or these constraints or these constraints. It would be a union type, right? Which is not the same as no constraint. We just don't know which yet.
Yeah, but there's still criteria to be evaluated.
There's still criteria. So I'm walking back my
exactly.
My vacuous set.
I can live with union type criteria. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about is using the adjective candidate ever relevant if there's no criteria that ever need to be evaluated. And I think that's a nice delineation where I would say, no, it doesn't match the definition. I mean, if you don't have, you could essentially use this to say, well, we don't have candidate claims. All our claims are instantly accepted.
No, I still think that vacuous criteria is a valid use case, but it's still, because maybe in many cases, the criteria have not been formalized yet. We know they exist, but we haven't put them in a system. But it's still the notion that something is a claim versus an entity is still valid and meaningful, even though the criteria have not been defined yet.
Yeah, but
so
we have words for that. That's claim and definition. I mean, that's the nouns. We don't need the adjective for that.
No, but what I'm saying is, even if the list of associated criteria is empty, because we have not formalized them yet, it may still make sense to speak of candidate claim and candidate. Don't modify this yet, please.
No, sorry.
I would allow that something can be a candidate, meaningfully a candidate, even if the list of criteria is not established. That's what I'm arguing. We know there's a list of criteria, we don't know what it is. So in the system, it's vacuous.
So somebody submits something as a type, but it's not known whether or not the criteria are unknown.
The criteria have not been formalized yet. So we still have not
So
criteria,
what do
but
you
some
what do you
other
do then? How,
process. Well, it will remain in candidate stage probably until we have criteria or a process or something.
so now you're actually arguing that the associated criteria can change, that they're not new, that they're not fixed to a domain type.
Absolutely. That's pragmatics, right? I mean, we may revise our definitions and decide, you know, this look like a claim, but actually we want a tighter definition of claim and exclude these now. And that may happen. And yes, that may make something that was established become a candidate again. That's another conversation. But to your question is, does the list of associated criteria have to be non-vacuous? I would say no. However, I think what is important to the meaningfulness of the candidate, for candidate adjective not to be vacuous, is we know that there is a list of criteria. It's just, it may or may not be known. That is different. But
fair enough.
So let's finish my edge case, please. It's kind of left hanging, and in a way, Tim's edge case. Text without specifying a type, the main type, yeah. And parenthesis, we know it has to we know it has to be assigned the domain type later.
You know, it has to be what?
We know domain type assignment is pending. Or we can consider it as a union type of known domain types, as a union of known domain types.
Or we can just call it a candidate type.
But isn't a union a domain? Isn't a union of types a domain type? So yeah, there's definitely no agreement on what domain type is, which is part of the problem.
Without specifying a specific domain type, maybe, or you could consider the union of known domain types as, or you could consider it as submitted as the union of known domain types, as the type of the union of known domain types.
Well, text submitted is, yeah, I don't, maybe
I'll write it.
I think in the struggle for examples, we go too far afield from what is useful to us.
True, but it also highlights my problem with domain type, because that's why we're struggling. The fact that the domain type doesn't have a definition doesn't mean we need to define it for this adjective to be useful, but it does highlight a bit what my problem was there. But I think, Michael, maybe this will work. Let me try. Text submitted to a system with multiple domain types, but it's not stated yet which one it is, or something like that.
Multiple possible domain types.
Yeah. Something like that.
Yeah.
And then you're talking about, oh, you did a contribution and we accept claims, definitions, and whatever, but we don't know yet which one it is.
Yeah.
Then candidate.
Yeah, I wouldn't call that an edge case. I would call that does not match definition.
Oh,
I would say
it does.
Something. Yeah.
Well, I would
have the candidate something when you say what it is intending to be, right?
Interesting.
Exactly, but if it intends to be one or the other, then that, if you give that thing a name, then you have a candidate, that thing with a name, and you have a candidate potato, and then the definition still works. So for me, it matches the definition. But I guess that's why it's an edge case.
Yeah, it can be argued either way. I see your point, Tim, and I certainly see the point of saying, well, it's a candidate for the union type.
Exactly.
Because we know it will fit one of those criteria, because, you know, it's still a candidate because it could fit none of the criteria of any of the types, and that way it's rejectable. And that way it's still a candidate. Tim?
In short, a union type is a domain type. It can be a domain type. So by extension, this matches the definition.
Yeah, you could deal with the situation by defining a domain type that is the union of the other domain types. So it's a candidate, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. That's why it's an edge case.
Yeah.
It's
okay.
true.
Leave it as an edge case. I'm fine. I don't. Yeah.
Consider the union type a domain type. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
The other one.
I think that's fine.
Yeah, and I think for me, what is more important is to agree that if it doesn't have criteria, that it's not a candidate. I really don't think it makes sense.
And what I'm saying is it could be that the criteria are not known to the system yet. We know there's criteria. We know there's a distinction between claims and entities, but we haven't written.
Yeah, but if it doesn't have criteria ever, it's not about not being known, which is a more esoteric edge case, I would argue. That never has acceptance criteria in a system. Like, okay, suppose.
Okay, fair. And I would add the edge case, something where the and I would add as an edge case, and I think it's an edge case, is information submitted to a system where the acceptance criteria are supposed known but not yet defined. Sorry, that's verbose. Well, just where for which acceptance criteria are not yet defined.
Which not yet defined, but
supposed to exist.
Supposed to exist or something like that. Yeah. Or will exist in the future. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Those edge cases. I think this is fine enough.
I'm happy.
For now. I mean, I'm not totally happy with everything, but it's good enough, I think, for our discussions. Timothy?
Yep, that's fine.
Oh, then we skipped a step. We can instantly go to alignments. Well, I'll leave it there until next meeting, just so it's clear.
Yeah.
Claim.
Wait, let me say one thing about the candidate examples I forgot to check. So do we have an example for a would pass criteria? Okay, that's fine. Okay, good. You know, I guess the one concern I have that's not made fully explicit is candidate whatever a superset of all instances of that type, or when something is quote unquote accepted or whatever other adjectives we're going to have, does it cease being a candidate?
I would tend to agree with the latter definition. So you're right, does not match definition something that has been.
Because my concern is also, like, sometimes we talk about things and we don't care about whether or not it's been accepted or not, or whether it's well formed or not, right? And I was thinking candidate would be the super term for that. But if it's, you know, well formed and accepted, then anytime we talk in the superset, we have to say candidate and accepted or something.
Yeah, I agree. Let's add accepted to does not match definition.
Yeah, and I'm updating the definition accordingly because that indeed wasn't encompassed. I'm trying information successfully submitted by user any actor for use as a specific domain type in the system, which may or may not satisfy shaded criteria for a well-formed instance of that type. Does that fit in one sentence? I mean, it's essentially hinting at the fact that it hasn't been evaluated yet.
Yeah. It may be a slow process.
Not yet evaluated.
For validity. Or well-formedness, I'm not sure if that's, yeah, that's the state.
For the superset case, then we may need to define something like instance. So if we
Isn't
say
it
like,
information
for
successfully
blank
submitted by user any active for use a specific domain type in the system? Something like that. I don't know. Maybe I'm making it more confusing.
I have no problem with that formulation either. I was fine before. This is also good.
And criteria and well-formed instance is essentially the same.
Well, there's two types of criteria, right? There's criteria that talks about minimum requirements. And there's criteria that talks about quality.
And we dropped the minimum requirements because that's the successful part, essentially.
Successful part, right?
I mean, I would leave the minimum requirements out of candidate because it's an implementation detail, if you ask me.
Right, I was okay with successfully submitted. Yeah.
Information may or may not satisfy the criteria. Whether the information satisfies the criteria or not is unknown since they have not yet been evaluated. And again, or an evaluation has not been, yeah.
What bothers me with this is dropping the notion of well-formedness, like acceptance.
To be well-formed.
Yeah, that's better.
Information. Yeah. Evaluated. Yeah, now I'm just moving stuff around, but it's short. Yeah, I think it's a bit clear, but yeah, we can always rephrase. But that means we also needed to add
does not match.
Yes, where was that? Here.
The earth is not flat once accepted as a claim.
As a claim in a claim repository after it has been. It really relies on the definition of accepted, right?
Yeah, it does.
Marked as accepted, essentially. I mean, otherwise, because now the question is if someone evaluates it but doesn't tell the system that it's okay, is it a candidate or not? It still is, right?
I think it's still a candidate. I don't think that's that important. I think that's too much of an edge case for me. I don't think we need a claim repository twice in the third sentence.
Which one? Sorry.
The earth is not fat as a claim after it's been marked as accepted in the claim repository.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think that addresses that one, Timothy. This warrants a comma.
With associated acceptance criteria to be well formed, it applies to domain type.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would kind of put that, I guess, as a comma after domain type, comma with comma in the system.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I know my writing skills today aren't great.
Tired. Okay. Okay.
Cool. Do we drag this to consensus or do we leave them in alignments? I guess for all purposes and intents, we can instantly go to consensus, right?
Yeah, if we're quorum, then yes, it goes to consensus.
It seems to be the case right now. We can always, if someone new joins, go over the existing definitions to extend quorum. We have 10 minutes. Does that mean we want to try our hand at claim candidate or
no? I said let's try usable.
Oh, so an immutable candidate claim, essentially. No.
No. Do we have? I thought we had usable as an adjective.
Usable. Yeah, usable.
Is it below and undefined? It should be.
No. We don't have. We have structurally linkable, which we for now decided not to define. We have accepted as immutable and externally linkable, and usable for now is immutable, externally linkable, and structurally linkable, which is undefined.
I see.
And I think the definitions are not polished yet. I don't recall. No, I think we were actually adding a candidate because we were trying to define claim candidate because we needed it for usable. Because I think we wanted to say that it's a. I forgot.
Well, I mean, the question is, the question was, do we allow linking to candidates, right? And that is, are candidates structurally linkable, even though structurally linkable is undefined? In other words, are they usable? And it's true that there's some debate about the mutability of candidates, which is a separate debate. I propose let's set that aside. But the question of, is it structurally linkable in candidate stage can be asked now. But we maybe need indeed to be a bit more, either have a clear idea of structurally linkable or usable or something like that, because that's really what we're trying to be able to state. There's a use case, and whether we agree it fits in our various systems or not, for allowing a candidate claim to be linked. Whether the use case may be accepted or rejected, but
yeah, and that's why we have structurally linkable. It doesn't matter. You can say that accepted whatever is structurally linkable or not. That's why I split them up. But I just noticed here that this whole discussion started because Timothy was like not certain about intended type, which is what we used before rather than domain type. So now essentially we've replaced intended type with domain type. But you can see that accepted as in candidate are highly interlinked. So maybe what we should do is exactly that.
Yeah, I approve.
Because a contribution is now a candidate something.
Yeah. A candidate contribution by a user.
Yeah, exactly. That should be possible to do.
Now that's interesting because we said
This can be removed, right? Because it's part of candidate.
Yeah.
That has been approved. So
it's a next candidate explicitly because once it's accepted, it's not a candidate anymore.
Yes.
And then we could say intended domain type to be consistent.
Where do you see type? Oh. That candidate type, essentially, for that candidate.
Yeah.
But then we use it as a noun. Yeah, I'll do domain type. I think this is fine. It does beg the question why we don't link candidate more to accepted.
But there's just a thing. There's just a thing now. It's when we say candidate contribution by a user, it's not exact. It's a next candidate. It was a candidate and it stopped being a candidate when it was accepted.
Once it has, by a user again can be dropped because it's part of the definition of candidate. So it's a candidate contribution once it has been approved by an individual community or community process conforming to acceptance criteria. To D, because now it enforces.
This is where I'm thinking like instance is maybe the term you want to use for any, candidate. What is a candidate before and after, right? What is not changing about the candidate is that it's an instance of that type.
Oh, so rather than contribution, want to write instance. Or what?
Yeah, because we already have contribution and instance is a bit more tricky. I've no problem either way.
I don't mind either way either.
But I think contribution is fine too.
Candidate information would be the fully correct aligned thing because we say.
No, but then it's circular.
Yeah. I think it's clear enough. What I think is more important is that we incorporate accepted into this definition because it is part of the.
Yes. Well, we could just say it stops being candidate once it's accepted at the end. It's kind of
this vague icky, they haven't been evaluated yet, and can't we just say
they haven't been accepted yet?
Unknown. Yeah. They. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. It's here the computer scientist in me wants to say candidate bracket T, accepted bracket T. Angle bracket T, because that's what we mean, right?
Yeah, just wrote it on in full D domain type. I mean,
yeah.
If you can't express your information science in plain language, there's an issue as well either way.
I've been doing too much TypeScript. Hey.
I like this.
Yeah.
I think this is clear now, and these two are obviously highly interlinked. Now we have the whole process of candidates being accepted. But what we wanted to do essentially is have usable claims be independent of candidates acceptance, which we still have, which begs the question, why did we need to do that? I think it was probably primarily because we were checking whether we had consensus on this intended type thing that we resolved now.
Yep.
Other than that, I don't think we need candidate and accepted for usable claim.
No. It's structurally linkable. Does structurally linkable require accepted or not? That's a system decision.
Contributed should probably be removed.
Yep.
Usable claim and immutable claim, which is externally linkable and structurally linkable. Structurally linkable we'll do not today, but we still need to. We have some informal agreement on that one, I think.
Yes.
Matches definition. Oh, an accepted claim. That's why I remember we were adding examples, and the examples we wanted to point to accept it, and then Timothy saw accepted, and that's where we started this discussion, I think. So
yep.
Now, oh yeah, okay, it links to that, that's why. So matches definition, an accepted claim in a claim repository which can be used as supporting. Oh yeah, of course. I think we're finished. So both a contributed and, well, we call it a candidate now. Accepted claim or a candidate claim. Yeah, so these examples are to show that acceptance is orthogonal to usable. That's a system decision. Does not match definition, a web page because it's not immutable. Yeah, and then we started to look at all of these to figure out whether or not we can just copy paste examples, and that should be possible. Immutable, yeah, web page. What's the other one? Externally linkable. Let's copy this one. And structural, we can't link to yet because we don't have that, but we can add that later. I think that's, oh, no, mistake. This one. I think this one is done as well.
I think so too.
Yeah, because what we did today was essentially to resolve the examples.
Yes.
Which now works. I think that's a nice way to end today, actually.
It is.
Yep.
So should we move it to consensus
so
even?
Clean, so tidy.
Yeah, let's organize these somewhat. Should we, because I think this is a nice place maybe to try to involve other people.
Yes.
So maybe we can add, these are the same. These three, I think we can ask people specifically to have a read off and see whether they agree, because it resolves a lot of the things that we, and externally linkable as well, right? Yeah. Oh, this one actually has quite a bit of, yeah, so this one can go back. Okay, I think that works. Then from, before, yeah, let me do this to go full circle. That's where we started. How do I add a link here again?
I gotta go. My other meeting started.
Okay. See you next time, tomorrow probably.
See ya.
Claim. Yeah, and these need to be fixed, but that's fine.
Okay, good job, folks.
Yeah, great results. Talk to you next time.
See you tomorrow. Yeah, and oh, by the way, we still have the issue of 2 appointments tomorrow competing.
But it's currently Timothy's slot still, right?
Yeah.
So you can decide. I hope I can find time. I'll probably be there. See you.
See you.